Okay. Good morning, everybody. I have got great pleasure in welcoming all the members to this meeting by Geeta. I should say now that Madras Naturalist Society MNS has been very lucky to have a lot of members who have specialized in many different aspects of natural history. I know natural history is an archaic word now, but I think that exactly explains what
Audio. Sudhakar, the audio not to be heard.
Audio.
Sudhakar, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Mm.
Oh, okay. I think it got. Yeah. Madras Naturalist Society has been very fortunate in having various members who have been doing wonderful work in natural history. And natural history is an archaic word, but exactly explains what our members have been doing. Instead of going into the details, a lot of people have specialized in various aspects of nature and natural history in MNS. And I am very proud to say that our MNS member, Geeta Iyer, has specialized in insects and especially in moths. She has been inspiration for a whole generation of students. Like we always used to say that today's students and the young people are tomorrow's leaders and decision makers. So being a teacher, Geeta Iyer used to work for Rishi Valley in JK institution, that is J. Krishnamurti Institution, Rishi Valley School. And also she used to be the headmaster of Sayadri School near Varanasi. So she has been an inspiration to a whole generation of students, and I am very sure these people are going to become very responsible leaders and decision makers, and will have a big role to play in the conservation of wildlife in the future. Just to say, I will just say a couple of lines about Geeta's. She has been an expert in insects. She has written a couple of books on insects, and the famous one is Sarpada, of course, very aptly named, six-legged in insects. It's a lovely book. I would recommend you to read the book. Very interesting book. It has got a lot of information. And she is also a regular contributor to the Frontline. And she had a wonderful series on spiders on Frontline several years back. And now, even now, she continues to contribute to Teacher Plus and Frontline on a regular basis. I would like to welcome Geeta to this and enlighten us about the world of moths. Thank you.
Yeah, Geeta, 1 minute before you start, the request to everybody, kindly switch off your video and your mics so that there is no disturbance. And Geeta will will make a presentation continuously. So any questions, please enter it into the chat box. As soon as Geeta has completed her presentation, we will go through the questions one by one like we've been doing in the past. Thank you very much, Geeta.
All right. Thank you, Sudhakar, for that lovely introduction. Very touched. And I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, MNS, for inviting me to talk about moths. So, if you see over here, the world of moths. And if you see, look at this, that moths live in a world where they have as many challenges to meet as we have. And today I want to present these moths in a slightly different way than they are generally known to be. You know, just now before starting, Yuvan said they are pests. Moths are seen as pests. If you look at the dictionary meaning for pests, it means something that causes a nuisance or something that causes harm to a human being or something that is in the form of an epidemic. If you look at that, anything that causes nuisance or anything that causes harm, it I think is as much relevant to human beings as it is to any other living being. I think all living beings have a useful side and not such a useful side to them, including human beings. Why is it that moths are singled out as pests? The word, I mean, describing them as pest is a very European concept. If you look at the Asian and the Arabian societies, they were never thought of as pests. See this little poem that I put up. A candle has been lit inside me, for which the sun is a moth. In the Sufi literature, moths are metaphors for fana, sacrifice. If you even look, if you talk to a farmer will only say, "Amma poochi vandirukku." He won't say pest, you know. Namba poochi kolli da nenikrom. We never, I don't think we ever look at a creature as a pest. We look at a creature that gives us trouble and call it by what it is. Poochi vandirukku, para vandu சாப்பிட்டுட்டு போச்சு, பூச்சி வந்து சாப்பிட்டுட்டு போச்சு. It's surprisingly only in English that we say pest for everything. And I want to tell you that moths are no more pests than any other creatures are. If you want to take a farmer's crops are destroyed as much by a bird, a butterfly, a butterfly which we all look at with such great admiration. A butterfly, they're all pests. But they're all good ones, they're all pests. But moths actually have a much bigger role to play than merely being pests. You know, there's actually a story about moths as seekers of complete truth, but I won't dwell into that because we have such a shorter time. Maybe if you have time later, I'll tell you the story. But what I want to tell you, I want to dwell for a minute to tell you why moths are important. Okay, there are 120 families of moths, 150,000 species, which means there are 10 times the number of butterflies. This is world over. And in India, so far we have about 84 families, about 15,000 species, and we're still discovering them. You know? Therefore, there has to be some importance, no? If they are there so many in number, way more than butterflies, huh? So, what is it that can? Why am I seeing all of this? Okay, all right. Okay, why are moths important? I mean, you can call them as night shift workers. They pollinate. Very few people really know that moths are the most important pollinators next to flies in a forest. If you really want to talk about conservation, you really need to know. You have to keep your plant, forest is defined by the trees and the other plant life that is over there. And without moths, large aspect of pollination is just not possible. Now, I'm presenting for you over here a study that was conducted by the University of Bristol. Okay, they found that nocturnal pollen transport happened by 103 moth species. 103 moth species were transporting pollen, pollinating. Of them, the more important ones like owlet moths, the underwing and tiger moths, and the looper moths, they were actually, pollinating so many different plants that actually are to be found at the moths found at night. And they found that these moths, how did they carry? They carried the pollen on their bodies. Moths have a very furry, hairy body. So when they sit down on a flower to feed, and they do feed on flowers, if they're always chewing up your plants. They're also feeding on pollen and nectar and all that stuff. So when they sit to feed, you find that 47 insect species, they pollinated families such as Rosaceae, Fabaceae. Fabaceae is what a major agricultural crop. And they found that 20% of these moths carried pollens from multiple sources, not just one particular plant, from different plants, and they carried it on their underthorax. Okay. Now, of course, there are moths that will carry pollen while they are feeding. Those are the hawk moths. Okay. The surprising thing was this data that I presented to you, the nocturnal macro moths, they were actually got from a study in agricultural ecosystem, landscapes that were having agriculture. Now, when you say agriculture and moths, we only think of moths that are destroying the agro ecosystem. But here they found that in the agro ecosystem, they had a highly complex interaction between plants and moths. So tell me, if in an agricultural landscape, there are 103 moths, and this is only in a very small area that they researched. There is so much area and there is so much diversity in which this thing can happen. Imagine how many moths there would be. And we don't even have any data from forests. And unfortunately, we don't even have such, which are the moths that are pollinating in agro ecosystem, even from India. We only know moths are pests, and therefore use pesticides, destroy them. When you do that, you're also destroying pollinators, and we cannot afford to destroy pollinators in today's thing, because your major pollinators, the bees, are on decline. We don't know how many flies are pollinating. Okay, and therefore, if you want help from a group of insects that are in such large numbers, we better be looking at them in a slightly different way. Again, why are moths so important? Well, they're becoming models for technological advancements. Now, there you've got agriculture and you've got technology. Research on hawk moth navigation is helping to develop programs for drones to navigate in unfamiliar areas. Insects navigate at night. A lot of them navigate without any problem at night. So just not hawk moths, even cockroaches are being used to find out how to navigate in dark. And hawk moth navigation is becoming a model for improving the navigation using drones. And this is going to be a big thing that lots of people will like. We use noise cancelling headphones, right? In which we are using certain fibers, etc. You'll find that there are some moths who are quite deaf, in a sense that they can't hear. There are moths that can hear, and therefore they use frequencies to neutralize that of the echolocation of moths. But what about deaf moths that they cannot hear? You find that the deaf moths can absorb 85% of incoming sound with certain structures that are present in their thoracic hair. They have lots of hair when moths are hairy. So in their hairy thorax, they have specialized structures that can actually absorb the bats' echolocation frequencies, and therefore they are not able to, they are able to put off moths. Moths are not able to find out where these are, and they can escape away. So they are, today they're trying to find out how we can actually use. And what was surprising was that the absorbing scales were very thin, not half as thick as what is being used by noise cancelling headphones and others like that, you know. Then imagine what would happen. And you're all, I know MNS is very much into birds. What would happen to your birds if there were no caterpillars of moths and butterflies? Tell me. Moths, you say that moths are a source of energy for many creatures, and they maintain a certain kind of balance in the ecosystem. There may be lots of caterpillars, but if all the caterpillars of the moths really, I mean, became adults or thrived, imagine what would happen. So they are there because they are also food, important in the ecosystem. I don't know, but in no school will you ever find a food chain that have got any of these insects or moths in it. You generally have got, you know, grass, grasshopper, frog, snake, eagle. That's a standard. You would think that, I mean, this goes on all the way till college. It doesn't stop. It starts with class 5 and till your BSc final year, you're only hearing food chains of this kind. There are so many different food chains, and moths have a very important role in this food chain because they are a source of energy. We somehow, unfortunately, we don't do these kind of studies to find out what kind of insect biomass, moths biomass are there that can be a source of energy for other creatures. Now, interestingly, for this very same reason, you know, plants and insects co-evolved. So the caterpillars of moths, they are feeding on leaves. So the plants have to protect themselves. So in order to protect themselves, the plants start producing compounds. And you know, these compounds are what then we use for medicine. We say medicinal value, you know, bitter compounds in leaves. Several of the compounds that you find in leaves that are being used for medicine and other purposes have all evolved in reference to pests, that are to protect themselves from pests. So the fact that moths and their caterpillars are trying to destroy plants actually instigates the plants to produce newer and newer compounds which we use. Now this moth that you see over here, this is a Gracilaria, and it's a moth that actually, any of you having your garden, home, a vegetable garden, you'll find that they mine the leaves. They actually live within the tissues of the leaves. So they're called leaf miner moth, you know. And in order to protect itself from such leaf miner moth, you'll find that the plants start to produce unpalatable compounds in them to repel these kind of moths. And lastly, a number of, I mean, I think many of you must have been on these ecotourism and all that stuff. Lot of moths. Moth watching is quite actually nice. You can sit back in a chair and put up a screen and keep watching moths. So moths are also contributing to sustainable tourism, and several communities are trying this kind of moth and butterfly tourism as a livelihood option. But their numbers are declining, and we really need to be worried. The fact, if you find out there are a number of insectivorous insects that are also declining because the insect numbers are declining, the moth numbers are declining. We often say moth, butterfly, dragonfly, etc., but they're all part of insects. The insect numbers are declining. A number of people are saying that, you know, no longer, earlier, if your street light was on, I can tell you in my own house, Sushindram, right in front of my house is a street light. 5 years ago, 5-6 years ago, there used to be so many moths that used to come into my balcony. They're no longer coming. Number has reduced drastically. And that's because all around me, although it's a village, we're becoming more and more urbanized. You know, we like to have one house is not enough for us. We need to have two houses. So everybody wants to have a house in Suchindram because there's a temple and you can be close to the temple. So never mind, agricultural habitats are being destroyed. And as the habitats get destroyed, you find that the biodiversity will also get destroyed. And are we really thinking about habitat conservation? So my moth journey actually started with this moth. And I think this is a moth, this moth, Convolvulus hawk moth, is something I think everybody can see. This is a male moth, this is a female moth, okay? And might surprise you to know that this was a moth I think I saw in 1995 or 94, like that's the first moth that I saw. And the male of this moth I saw only in 2012 in Kudirevetti inside KMTR. You know, I never saw how the male looked. This is the female Convolvulus hawk moth. This one and then this is a geometric moth, a lovely green geometric moth that used to come and sit for some reason, or not only to the moth, it used to come and sit on my soap dish. If I had left the soap dish outside to dry, I would invariably find, and I forgot to take it back at night, it would come and sit on it. And this is, again, both these moths were at Rishi Valley. These are what one would call opportunistic sighting, in the sense that I didn't go looking for them. They were there. You know, one of my students would otherwise pick it up and come and show it to me and say, do you know the name? And at that point in time, I didn't even know the name of this moth. I said, no, I don't know the name. Okay. And then you went around because somebody comes and asks you a question, and especially if it's a student, you try and see whether you can find an answer for it. And when you try to find an answer for it, your own journey of knowledge, education starts in some way. So, how does one study moths, right? If it is only for, say, you know, conservation purposes, or you want to just enjoy, then you just put a moth screen like this, a screen with the light source on top. Okay, so you can see how it looks. You get enough have put it and at what angle you have put it. You can get plenty of moths, as this shows. And then sometimes we also, because in forest you never know when it will rain, we usually put an umbrella on top, or as you can see over here, there's a covering here on top. The bulb is here, the covering on top. Or generally, otherwise we put a umbrella on top, and you'll find that there are moths even on umbrellas. However, those who are researching for moths and they want to kind of collect moths use what are called as light traps. These are light traps. So the moth gets attracted to light and it falls down right inside. It will go, there's a light source over here, it tries to come towards the light source and to just get trapped over here. Then it's easier for them, you know, to take it to their laboratories and use it properly. Whereas over here, you have to collect it, catch it, its wings can get destroyed, the scales can get destroyed. So researchers generally like to use a moth trap. And I would suggest that when you're going very close to this, and those who have gone to a moth screen with lots of moths, they'll try and enter into your hair, your nose, your eyes, etc. So generally also the light is so bright, we usually use a goggle like this so that you can protect your eyes from this. But these are moth screens in the Northeast, okay? But the one that set me going inside KMTR was this one. You can see. Okay, this is at Kudirevetti. So one night, I had 5,000 moths, of which this one, one species had kind of hatched out that day. So we had this one, Botiodus that came, just Botiodus itself that day, I would have got something like close to 2,000 or something like that. And in Kudirevetti, I think Kudirevetti should be declared as a moth sanctuary. I'm asking the FT to declare it the first moth sanctuary that you can have. Because anytime you go to this place, anytime, nighttime, you will see a huge number of moths. It's my most favorite place to watch moths. Now, there are other ways of also looking at certain moths. And you have what are called as baits and lures. So there's a pheromone lure, and pheromones are chemicals. So you kind of put it in a bag like this and hang it somewhere. You'll find that moths are getting attracted towards it. They'll come and say, these are generally pheromones, sexual pheromones. So moths will try to come here to mate with them, etc. Then there are sugar baits. You mix a bit of sugar, fermenting fruit, and you can apply it on tree trunk or stones and things like that. And those moths that usually feed will generally, like the hawk moths, etc., will usually come over there. Or there's another technique known as vine roping. In vine roping, you kind of mix a bit of wine and sugar and apply it, tie a cord or a rope between two trunks of two trees, and you apply on that, and you'll find that again moths come. So these are some of the ways by which you attract moths. Supposing you want to breed, these are I'm talking about if you want to do very technically and all that stuff. These are some of the breeding cages. You can make your own actually. If you look at this, these are breeding cages. You allow eggs, caterpillars, or allow pupation, etc. to happen. What do you do after? And this is something that unless you are a researcher, you shouldn't attempt. You have to sometimes collect moths in order to identify them. So when you collect moths, you don't know how many moths are there, how many are disappearing. So you should be very careful about them. So scientists use what are called as pinning board. This is a pinning board, okay, in which you actually first, if you have collected a moth, it dries up. Then there's a softening process where you take a glass bottle and keep some moist cotton in it and leave your moth inside it for about 24 hours. You will find that the wings, etc., soften. And then once the wings have softened, you put it on a pinning board and you pin it like this. You have to push the forewing up like this, okay, and then put a piece of paper on top of it like this and pin the paper to keep the wing in place. Do the same with this, so that this forewing is actually like this, perpendicular to it. Pin it up and then pin it right through the thorax in the center. That's how it is put. First pin is put into the thorax so that the body rests in this crevice, and then strips of papers are used to pin like this, and they're left on the pinning board. They look like this, and finally transferred to a box where they are stored safely. But this is to be done only if you are planning to do research on the moths. Otherwise, don't collect them. I have not collected a single moth so far, but that's a different story. Now, why do we need to collect them in order to identify them? If you look at these moths, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all of them are one single species. They are innominate geometrid moths called Cusiala raptaria. Can you see how they look? You would never know that they are the same moth, isn't it? Each one has a different pattern. This is from Kudirevetti KMTR and Sengalteri, both these places. We found that Hampson has described them in the fauna of British India, and he has described only 1, 2, and 3. This is a different form. All these forms, we still don't know. We have to collect and find out whether they are subspecies or they are form. Currently, they are known as Cusiala raptaria, 1, 2, 3 forms, but I have found 4 more forms. And unless I collect them and I examine their genitalia, I would never know whether they are the same species, different species or not. But I'm pretty happy to call them all Cusiala raptaria because I'm not a researcher. I watch moths just because I like watching them. And also I'll show you a few more. Now, if you go by the same like this, like they all look same, right? Same species. Look at these two. They look so similar, isn't it? They belong to not only not the same species, They belong to a completely different genus altogether. This is a Chlorochromodes geometrid moth. This is an Argyrocosoma geometrid. Complete, but look at them. They look so similar. So moths can really kind of take you for a ride because they don't want, they're very secretive. They're not going to let you know more about them unless you have a purpose. Same thing over here, you can see. They're all Nothomyza. Sorry. All these three. This is right up from Tawang. Okay. This is from Nagaland. And this is from Mizoram. So all these are Nothomyza from different. So you'll find that unless if you really want to seriously know them, describe them and etc., you have to collect them. And that's why entomologists say, why don't you collect the moths? And also in order to study them, you collect them, you'll find that look, these two look the same. But the difference is that the whole body is completely pink. Whereas here it's pink here, it's pink there, but its body is white over there. So in order to identify a moth, there are a whole lot of features. Sometimes you'll find that in this one leg, there will be a little spur, two spines over here, and that makes it a completely different species of moths. You know, you'll find that the labial valve from here sticking out. How far does it stick out? How wide is it? All these are small features of a moth's body that tells you whether it's the same species or is it a different species. Now look at all of this. When you look at this, you'll see that a moth sits like this, so different. The moment it opens out, the hind wing. A hind wing is a very important part of identifying a moth. And the moth never lets you have a look at it. So sometimes you'll have to gently push its forewings to see. Sometimes if it doesn't, then you have to very carefully, and that way you have to learn that you don't destroy its scales, pick it up to see. Now look at the pattern here and look at the pattern here. They are the same, isn't it? But this is a completely different genus, Asota, and this is this is Neochera. You can see it. This is Neochera inops. Look how different they are. But if you were to just look at its forewing in its sitting position, they would both almost look the same. And so how do you find out its hind wing? Gently, sometimes they allow you to pick you up, you know. You can slowly put a little twig underneath it. Gently, it will climb on to the twig like this. Then you pick it up, you will know what its underside looks like or what its hind wing looks like. Hawk moths will come onto your hands, fingers gently if you take them. These are various techniques by which you can take a look at them. I mean, I put this one over here, but if you had looked at the earlier one, this is also an Asota, okay? I had showed you this is also an Asota. This is also an Asota. They belong to the same genus. Look how different they are. And lastly, we also measure them. Sometimes their width is a hint to tell you what kind of moths this could be. And then it's sometimes very difficult. Look, this is a geometrid moth and this is an Arabid moth. They look almost like same shape, isn't it? So what's the difference between them? The difference between them lie in the small venation. Look at the veins over here and look at the veins over here. So veins play another important role. And how can you find out if it's about its veins if you don't have it in your hand? You have to have them in your hand. And that's why sometimes collection is inevitable if you want to describe a species. And let me tell you something. But for a moment. Okay, how do I share this? Can you see the screen, anybody? Hello? Yuval? Are you able to see the screen?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
you can, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, okay. How do I show you? Bear with me, huh? Can you see these moths?
Yeah. We can see a list of pictures, a set of pictures.
Yeah, so this, what I'm showing you are moths that are, why does it say my internet connection is unstable? Okay, these are moths that are not from here. This picture is from the ZFMK Museum in Germany. Okay, and these are moths that were collected from Kalakad Wildlife Sanctuary in 1997 by a German and a Russian. You know, and you find that they have still not been identified. Look at this, again from Kalakad. They have not been identified. And all these moths, if you were to compare them, the ones I have, this is the moth that I found, okay? They're still not the same as what was collected by those Germans over there. And these are all new species that have not been described at all. And can you see them? So each one, so this and this, they're not the same, and none of them have a name yet. So, and they are lying in a museum in Germany, not even with us, okay? And the gentleman from Germany told me, have you been able to collect it? So we need to describe them because we don't know what they are. And no, and I have not collected them. And in course of my my wandering through KMTR, this is another hawk moth, which is likely to be new. And unless you collect them, this is again a new species. This beautiful moth is
Are there
again,
pictures you're showing? Are you
huh?
showing pictures?
Yeah, I am.
We are
What?
not able to see single pictures. We're able to see a set of pictures.
You couldn't see this? You can see this? Okay, why am I not able to okay, wait a minute. Can you see it now?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, so I go back to what, so you could, you saw this? Did you all see this?
We are just seeing it singly right now. Yeah.
Okay, so I was saying that these are the moths that are there in the museum, ZFMK Museum in Germany. Okay, and these moths, they're collected in 1997. They have yet to be identified. See, all the, not this. And this is my collection of similar kind of moths that are there in ZFMK, and I don't have a name for them either because we have not collected them. And along with this, so these are all, they belong to a genus called as Abraxas. We don't know what species they are. Now, in addition to this, I was saying that this is another hawk moth that I found in KMTR, which is also likely to be a new species. And unless I collect and find out its genitalia and describe it, we won't know what species they are. Similarly, this one, this very beautiful moth is from Shangalteri, you know. It's called Tatar Jina, but we don't know what species it is. The tiger, this is a tiger moth, and the tiger moth expert said unless you collect them, we won't know what they are. So the point I'm trying to make is, why do we need to collect? Can you see this? Can you see?
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. So the point I was trying to tell you is, these are some criteria where you can find out about them and you have them in your hand without dissecting them. You know, even if they are on your screen, you can kind of pick it up on your hand, look for some of these creatures. But then say you're an amateur, you're just wanting to see moths for the fun of it, and you want to put a name to it, what can you do? So here is something I have put together. If we look at the moth, gist of the moth, can you find out what they are? So you'll find more about this in this website. This is adapted from this Taiwan moths website, where they are very nicely put together some things. So if the moth's shape is roof-like.
One second, ma'am. We are still stuck in the previous picture. Could you share again?
Oh,
Ah.
okay. All right. Now what's happening? Can you see now? Are you seeing?
Yes, we are the presentation.
Yeah, that's what I was. Okay. So I was saying that if you had them in your hand, then you will find that some of these features that I said till now can be looked at to find out what they are. But even then, if it's going to be very difficult and you just happen to be a person who wants to just watch moths and just know a little bit about them, then you can use this kind of, ready reckoner to know what moths they could be. Like if this is the shape of the moth, then it could belong to one of this family. Okay. And you can actually then go to Moths of India website, and you will find that on the Moths of India website, show you for a minute. Give me a minute. So on the Moths of the India website, you'll find family names. Like, can you see this? Are you seeing it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So this is the Moths of India website. Okay. And on the Moths of India website, on the left-hand side, you have the names of the families. Okay. So once you look at the gist of the moth, and if it's like this, then you can go to Moths of India website and click on some of these families to find out the name of your moth. So if it is flat and hook, so flat shape, then it could be an Arabidae, a Geometridae, a Drapanidae, Uranidae, Saturnidae, any of these. And if it is flat with a bit of a hook like this, this is just flat. This is a bit of, it could be one of these 4 families. Similarly, these are a tailed moth, and it could be a Uranidae, a Saturnidae, or an Epicopidae. Some of these names have newly, new moth families have come in. And if it's T-shaped like this, again, it could be Arabidae. You notice that Arabidae and Geometridae come very close, often in many of these, because these Arabidae is a moth family with the largest number of moths in India, and closely followed by Geometridae and Noctuidae. So you find their names cropping up, and they come in different shapes. So again, like this, one of the wings kind of folding into the other one, you find that it could be any of this. And this shape you really can't miss out. It's called forward swept. I mean, actually, these are all translation from the Taiwanese language. So I don't know. I used Google to have them translated. So I'm not completely sure whether they're the way it should be, but it is a forward swept, and you'll find that there are 2 parts of these wings kind of sticking up like that. I'll show you an example. You will know. And it's very interesting. The crambed and pyralid moths translation for the Taiwanese word was given as bomber. This is called bomber. Arrow-like, it's Fingidae. And if it is butterfly-like, it's Calidulidae. This is these moths look very much like the oriental butterfly moth. So they are butterfly-like, they belong to Calidulidae. So remember I said forward swept. So can you see them? See how they're, so these are Notodontidae, Lasiocampidae, okay? So you find that they have all of it like this. And if there's a tail, you find here is a swallowtail moth. This is a familiar, everybody knows this, I think. I mean, I keep seeing this on the black buck mail thing. People ask what this moth is. Moon moth. And this is this is not a butterfly. It looks so much like a butterfly, isn't it? But it is a swallowtail moth, typically looking like one of those papilios. And I said, there are so many different shapes to Arabidae. So you can see some of the Arabidae moths. These are all, this, and this are tiger moths of different kinds. And this is a tussock moth. And these are all true Arabid moths. And you can see how varied in shape they are. So it's a bit of a challenge when you see the moths in a field and then when you try and put a name to them, you know. So this, I mean, because everybody is on social media and internet and whatnot, if you were to go and look up, somebody will tell you this is a Bombycid moth. It used to be part of Bombycidae. Now it's been moved into another family called as Andromidae. And this is, remember I showed you that a butterfly-like moth. So they are oriental swallowtail moths belonging to the family Epicopidae. So this is Epicopia phylinora. Moth names are a bit of a tongue twisters. So if you were to call me in a field and say, what is the name of this moth? I'd say, look at my list and tell you. I never try to keep the names in the head because they're such tongue twisters. And this is Eutelidae, another one, which is a different moth. This is the butterfly moth that I was telling you about. Okay. And so we started with what we called as pests, right? Somebody said that they are pests. But actually you will find that, a minute. Sorry. You would find that pest is a very European term, you know. And as I said earlier on, that Asians and the Arabian cultures have a practice of actually looking at living beings differently. And this moth, okay, called the Brahmaya heresy, the Brahman moth, is actually worshipped in Taiwan. It is, I believe, endangered, and I'm not so sure how correct that is, but this is an endangered moth in Taiwan and appears in April, okay, around this temple. And it comes and sits on the deity. So people actually come there to look at this moth and believe it brings good luck to them. So I wonder then, how should we be looking at moths? I mean, look at the diversity of it. And I just want to stop here for a minute and I'll show you how diverse they are. Give you a minute to take a look at the diversity. Where should I say? Yeah, how do I go back and share something else, I say? Well, there's this bit of a tricky thing trying to move from one screen to another screen. Wait a minute, let me see where is mine. A few minutes, huh? I seem to have lost my screen. trying to show it as a. Yeah. So here is how diverse the moths are.
We are seeing a white screen.
You're not seeing it? Why?
There's only a white screen.
Oh God, what's happening here? Just a minute, huh? Now, can you see it? Are you seeing it?
Not
No?
yet. Not yet.
Okay. What's happening here? Wait, hold on, huh? I'm trying to figure out where. Now, can you see? Yeah?
Yeah, lots of
Are you able to
pictures. Yeah.
Okay. Now, okay.
Ah.
So I just want to show how diverse the moths are. And so I'm just going to share some of the moths that I have been able to see over my various years of, and then I'll just finish it off for you. So it's just, I mean, I've not even touched the world of eggs of moths or caterpillars or pupa, because there's as much as you can see over here, diversity in them as you will find in the adult moths themselves. So much diversity. I mean, you can do a separate presentation on just eggs of moths, or just on caterpillars of moths, or just on pupae of moths. It is said that if we could shut off the lights, street lights at midnight, at least after about 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock, we would actually help in conserving moths. It's because you find that many of these moths don't feed as adults. So when they hatch out from their pupa, they're actually full of eggs which they want to get fertilized and lay them. So this urge to lay eggs, you know, the urge to find a mate, especially to lay eggs, is like you wanting to either defecate or pass urination, defecation. The urge that is there, it's the same urge that a moth has in order to lay its eggs. And so if it is not able to control the urge, then it lays its eggs on the first available surface, and it is usually attracted to lights. So sometimes you find that if you put on your screen, the moth comes to the screen and lays its eggs all on the screen. So actually putting a moth screen to watch a moth is not doing the moth a big favor, you know. And it's also like it makes the moth a sitting duck for a whole lot of predators, the praying mantis, okay, then the red-winged bugs, then several of these net-winged insects, the whole range of predators. In fact, once midnight, a quail came to eat the moths. You know, it came flying in and it started hovering, and I had to switch off the lights and shoo it all away. Usually that's what we do, you know, in the morning when we switch off the lights from the light screen, we usually ensure that all the moths leave the light screen. They don't want to leave because it's so nice and warm and cozy. They don't want to leave, but that's how it is. So there has been a suggestion that if for some time there's so much of artificial lighting that it's actually confusing the moths, and whether we could not have so much of, we could switch off the lights for some time. We do a lot of not just moths, probably a whole lot of other creatures also. And so you find, and when you look at this, there is no dearth of shapes, sizes, colors, patterns, etc. So, and so I therefore will finish off by saying can you see? I've changed the thing.
Yes. Brahmide.
Yeah, Brahmini. So there is this lovely book. If you can lay your hands on it, do read it. The Lives and Times of Archie and Mehitable. It's a conversation between a cockroach and a cat. Archie is a cockroach, and it's written by Don Marquis. I think it may not be available. Print is out of stock, I think. So a lot of things. So it says about the lesson of the moth. Our attitude towards life is come easy, go easy. We are like human beings used to be before they became too civilized to enjoy themselves. I think this is probably what the corona is telling us also. So from moths and me, that's all I have to say. Thank you. And if you have questions, I'll take it from there.
Thank you very much, Geeta. That was absolutely to the world. I will now quickly go to the chat screen to see what the questions are there for you.
Okay.
And okay. Now, this is Badri, Dr. Badri's question. Do we have data as to how many Lepidopteran caterpillars are supported by each native plant and exotic in India? This is with reference to Douglas Tallamy's work on such data in North America. He goes on to say that some plants act as hubs with so many Lepidopterans being dependent, and such plants could be good plants to have in a bird-friendly garden. So
yes, quite true.
Yeah. He says you can think of Calopteris to start with.
Yeah, Calotropis is there. See, I'll tell you another plant. You can have several of Solanaceae plants, because lots of limanted moths like them. We have some data, and most of them are based on agricultural practices on fruit trees or, pulses and crops like that. We don't do those kind of work of data collection that the Americans or the Europeans do. They're still not even doing taxonomy. So when you don't do taxonomy, how would you even know what moth is there? And mind you, for proper taxonomy, you actually need to breed. Most of the lepidopterists who work on moth species, they actually try to breed them. They try and get them to lay eggs and find their host plants and try and breed them in order to find out more about them. So I don't think we have that. We have very limited and scattered data, nothing as pointed as what he's asking. No, we don't have.
So about half an hour, 35 minutes after your presentation began, Dr. Badri had to say, hope each species can identify itself. It's just a comment, okay? Because it becomes so difficult for the species for you to identify the species. He says, I hope each species can identify themselves. So, right.
So the next, so as in Alice in Wonderland, Alice says, what is the name?
Yeah, I know.
It's but what human beings, I mean, look at them, enjoy them. See, as an amateur naturalist, what is it that you want? You will ask that question. I mean, there are lots of philosophic questions that the moths raise for you. What is it that you want? Okay, you want to see them. This whole urge to put a name to it, if that stops, then we start looking at them more closely and we have a greater relationship. And I think that is more important for conservation than really knowing. Yes, knowing the name helps because, you want to share that information with someone who is doing in conservation and etc. like that. But then if you become so focused on trying to put a name, you miss the larger picture of any of the organisms. You fail to see what it's doing. And then the question as to why is it doing that and how is it doing that? And that itself will give you a greater amount of knowledge to conserve it in its habitat than really knowing a name. I once thought, because I found all these names such tongue twisters and all that. And since I know that if I tell a student this kind of name, I will put that child off the organisms altogether. It's a thing that I should let children, name them as what they please. And you'll find that children are very creative. They'll give you much nicer names for these moths than the tongue twisters we have. But we need the tongue twisters, because biologically that's what they are.
No, I know. Very true, very true. So the next question is like some other insects. Can moths cause allergies when touched?
Yeah, not moths, but moth caterpillars.
Yeah.
Definitely. Moth caterpillars. Am I sharing anything at all? I don't know.
Yes, Trabala. We are seeing.
Sharing a trabala, yeah.
No, I can't see it at all, so I'm just not this. Why am I don't know where I am. Hold on a minute.
Looks like a tusker.
Yeah, it is. No, I'm just trying to see. My screen is not coming on. Zoom screen is not coming on. So I don't know where it is.
It's there, right in the. We are all able to see it. Yeah. So
I'm not able to see it.
okay. So the next question is, other than the role of pollination, is there any other specific role on moths play on maintaining the ecosystem, service?
Look, they are food for a whole variety of animals. Does that not count?
Yeah, yeah.
Huh? I mean, what is life if we didn't have food?
Yeah, I know.
Tell me, isn't it? Huh?
True,
What will you do? What will you do if you didn't have food at all? So that's very important, and that is something that is usually missed out. I don't know why we miss out that moths are not important food source. Can you? That's my first, and that's what I'm trying to look for, and I'm not able to find my that particular file. Is that's what I showed you first? That praying mantises eat them, frogs eat them, lizards eat them. Okay, whole variety of insects eat them. That's a very important thing, and the fact that their caterpillars eat plants, it induces the plants to produce newer and newer chemicals, which anthropomorphically speaking is good for us,
Yeah.
We can use them, right?
Very true. Very true. So I think that's it as far as questions go, but there are a lot of comments saying that it was wonderful, there was a great learning involved.
Thank you very much, because I don't seem to have, I don't know what I've done to the screen. I'm not able to see anything excepting my own screen. So I want to say thank you so much. I hope it's been of some use to you.
Absolutely.
I don't know what was expected, but if you have something, you can ask me a question and I'll answer that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have got a question. The thing is, moths seem so complicated. How can you enthuse people to watch moths? What will be the first steps? Very, very simple steps which you can start watching moths, and how to get people interested in watching moths, because you can take it as a citizen initiative or something. If more people start watching moths, as you say, that we can get a lot more information than being pursued by only a few people who are absolutely interested in this.
Yeah, all over India, we have just about some 40-45 people studying moths, which I think in some ways is good, because if you look at something like a millipede, there's nobody studying all over India. So I guess, but what I think is that if you just watch, look, I might sound a bit old-fashioned over here, but can you watch something for the sake of watching it rather than trying to find something? So I find that then you'll get naturally interested in it, and that kind of interest is what I think matters. I can't think of any easy way to get people interested in looking at moths. Insects, either you like them or you don't like them. I think it just works like that. You know, if you like them, fine. If you don't like them, what can one do about that?
No, I was thinking more like maybe we have about 20 common species like birds. We see about 10 species in a ordinary Chennai city garden. So,
Yeah.
what are the common species of moths which you are likely to see in a household in a place like Chennai, and we can print a guide or something like that so that we can distribute it and so that people go and can see.
Yeah, that's quite nice. I think your some of the young people in your group, all the Yuvan and Vikas, and I think they're doing some work in this park, no? What is that?
Adayar
Adayar Punga. So they would come across some of these. See, there are some day flying moths. There are some very lovely day flying moths. I mean, not all moths are nocturnal. There are some diurnal and day flying moths. And that's what I said, you know, we have this, the Moths of India website is a great resource for finding out what are the common moths or knowing the name of the moth. That's what we have done to simplify this whole process so that one is not going around in circles. And that's why I gave you the gist, you know, so that you look at the gist and then you go to Moths of India website, click on the name of the family, and then you can scan through and see whether you have the moths or not. But there are some common day flying moths which are generally tiger moths are there. Okay, mostly they are either tiger moths or geometric moths. You know, you'll find that and you should be able to see them. I think they are probably the most common ones. Most probably what you will see will be caterpillars rather than moths, you know. For example, you'll see a caterpillar hanging from with a string, you know. I don't know how many of you see suddenly something hanging from the air, you know, from the treetop coming down. They're all what we call as looper moths, and they're all belonging to the geometric family. Actually, I'm trying to get the screen to show you some of those common moths, but I'm not able to, for some strange reason. I'm not getting my, I'm not able to share. I wanted to show you that the photographs of those common moths. Something has gone wrong with my zoom out over here. I'm not able to share anything anymore. I don't know what. So
Yeah, anyway,
I'm not
thank you
able
very much. We can revisit this subject probably in another 5 or 6 months' time in another Zoom meeting where we can
Yeah,
discuss.
I mean, I think if you tell me specifically what is it that you want to know, then it'll be easier for me to kind of give it to you rather than if the common moths that you want to see, daytime flying moths. I think I can put together a presentation on that if you want. I know.
Yeah, that will be lovely. Yeah, we will come back on that to you. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think there are some comments over here, and thank you everybody. Thank you for watching. I hope it's been of some. Your time has not been wasted. And
No,
you liked it.
absolutely not. I think it's been very, very informative, you know, and great learning. So, as Sudhakar said, we will definitely come back and ask specifically. I think it's a good thing, no? If you can make a good presentation on the common moths that one can see, and then
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, why not?
So we'll.
Today was an introduction, so I was not really sure what was like.
This was more than an introduction. I think it was something which was, I mean, assumed things that we had in our minds, which were, you know.
I also gave that whole stuff about identifying and studying moths because I thought in your MNS group there are college professors, lecturers, and all, and I hope somebody can pick this up as a school college project. You know, I don't know why we are not seeing more research on moths. You know, zoology students in colleges, BSc, MSc students, PhDs should be coming up. We should be coming up more on moths. You know.
Correct. I know. I think the number kind of is daunting. You know, 150,000 species. Boy, you know, where do
That's worldwide.
I know.
But you can pick up. There are very small ones. I mean, you start study as something not over ambitious, something small. Correct. It's very important. See, for example, look at the study which Bristol University students have done on agro landscape. it shows that the moths are not just pests, they're also pollinators. In the same agricultural ecosystem, you have moths as pests and you have moths as pollinators.
Right.
So, it's not so black and white to say that they are, pests. I think the word pest should be removed from that, because even human beings are pests, right? Would you eliminate them? Tell me.
So, yeah. This is something which you dispelled very beautifully. The fact that, moths are perceived as pests. And so, yeah, very nice.
In fact, we should get rid of the term pest. It's a very, very European term, You should, nobody in India, you look at any vernacular language, you will not find the term pest. You will find specifics. You will find Puchi. Puchi kolita ne solro number, right? So it's a Puchi parave. So I think we should look, because if you want to really get into that thing of conservation, then it is something greatly philosophic, It's on another realm altogether, and we need to move into the realm. I'm telling you, COVID is telling us that.
True.
So let's be looking at biodiversity,
Yeah, very true. Anyway, I don't think there are any more questions for you, Geeta. So,
Oh, thank God. Good.
so thank you very, very much. And Sudhakar, please, your final comments, please. Hello.
Hello.
Sudhakar? Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you very much. It has opened the wonderful world of moths. So we look forward to working more with you and more with moths, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, I finally found myself. I couldn't see myself.
Thank you, Geeta.
Okay. Thank you, Yuvan. Thank you, Sudhakar. Thank you, Vijay Kumar. And thank you, all of you, for inviting me to give this presentation.
Thank you, Geeta. Enjoy the rest of the day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.